The year is 1993, and the world was losing its mind that we were finally getting a live-action adaptation of the most popular video game franchise the world had ever seen. With stars like Bob Hoskins as Mario and John Leguizamo as Luigi, the story follows two Brooklyn plumbers as they enter a strange parallel universe ruled by the evil King Koopa, deliciously played by Dennis Hopper. Unlike the colorful and playful video games, the film presents a darker, cyberpunk-inspired world filled with futuristic technology and dinosaur-like creatures. It's like Blade Runner meets Brazil in there. Upon release, the film received mostly negative reviews because fans felt it didn't capture the spirit of the games. However, over time, it's gained a cult following for its unique style, creative set design, and unusual interpretation of the Mario universe. It remains an important early example of video game adaptations in Hollywood. This week, we cover the ever-divisive Super Mario Bros. The movie.
Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, two titans of cinematic review. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always captivating. Your hosts Antonio of the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and Justin Henson of the Movie Wire are here to take you back to the balcony.
And I guess much like Howard the Duck, this movie really just is based for an audience that it was raised with. I don't know about you, man. Like, I saw this in the theater by myself. It was one of the first movies where I went and just walked to the theater at age 12, bought a ticket, and I think I probably saw it 3 times in the theater. It just worked for me as a kid, but I do understand that there were a lot of, let's say, older Nintendo fans that just didn't get it. And it being like the first real video game adaptation of a film, adults didn't get it, critics didn't get it, and I don't know if that is because the world wasn't ready for a video game adaptation like this, or if they just really dropped the ball in its representation, yet somehow created a whole different thing entirely that had its own unique audience that grew over time. I know more people that don't like this movie than do like it, but people that do like it for what it is and how different it is from the video games just really are mad about it and have a cult following. I got the 4K from Umbrella that I've had for a couple years on my shelf. It's one of my prized possessions. So that's how I feel about this movie. So the real question is, Justin Henson, there's a poster behind you. I can only assume one thing. How do you feel about Mario Brothers?
I love this movie. I will go on the hill and defend this movie. I almost blurted out masterpiece, but I know I'd probably piss a lot of people off. But here's kind of the deal: is this movie was ahead of its time. It really was, and it is
Agreed.
a loose adaptation on the video game. This one was a vision of in the 90s. How do we adapt this outlandish premise of a video game? And this probably went through numerous rewrites, and even during production it went through rewrites, but at the end of the day it looks great. The performances are fun, the score is fun, it's whimsical. It tries to do a lot. It tries to capture this movie at its childish premise but make it adult. But I remember going to the movies to see this and afterwards getting the Slurpee cups and being content with how it came out. As a kid, I loved it because it seemed like a Super Mario adult movie that, should I be watching this? It's a little visual risque, but it was innocent enough. So to me, I think if you take Mario Brothers out of the title, after the rewatch last night, I said, you know what? This is almost like Star Wars to an extent, is you have some imagination to it. And if you didn't have an expectation of what this movie was surrounding, it's just crazy enough to work if you just got rid of, this is a Super Mario Brothers movie. This one, if you took that out, it would probably be a different expectation. And this is where expectation really does kind of ruin some adaptations or movies, is as a standalone movie, there's a lot more that works here than doesn't.
I think that it owes a lot of its aesthetic and style to Ninja Turtles from 1990, which was our premiere episode that we did on this show, because Ninja Turtles did have a dark comic book history, but let's not pretend that the popularity really rose from the toys and from the animated series, which were bright and colorful and funny and whimsical. And the movie was kind of dark, mysterious, grody, had some sensuality to it and some danger to it. And the critics did not agree with the direction that it went. But were they Ninja Turtle fans to begin with? Now, Mario Brothers is different because its audience was all over the place, right? It wasn't just kids. Everyone wanted Nintendo, and everyone liked Mario Brothers for a different reason. I'm like, my mom was probably in her early 30s when Nintendo came out, and she liked playing Mario Brothers with me, right? It just had a wider age gap. So how do you make a film that captures both the audiences? The kids that like the cartoonishness of it. Remember, there was a Mario Brothers animated series on for years before this movie came out. But then also the adults that kind of went along with it. Now, I'm not going to say that Nintendo adults were as crazy as Disney adults. It's a different kind of fan base, but they did have an expectation. So I get the challenge of making a movie that can appeal to everyone in that audience, both young and older. Our directors, Annabelle Jankel and Rocky Morton, like, they weren't known for anything really, but they did have the ambition to get this thing done. And yes, I watched all the special features on that 4K right when it came out. Roland Joffe, like the director of The Mission, was a producer and at one point a potential director for this. Like, it went through so many different hands as it got made. And if you listen to Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo, they had a terrible time making it because no one could agree what the real message was of the movie. No one could agree on the style. No one could agree on what the theme, or if it's dark or if it's whimsical. But I think that's what the brilliance of the movie is that it does a little bit of everything all throughout the movie in different ways. And it really focuses on the talent of the actors. So not just, Hoskins channeling his Eddie Valiant. I have no problem with that. Leguizamo was still kind of new to the scene, right? He'd been in some De Palma films. He'd been in some TV shows. But this was like his first chance to kind of like be second billing of a movie, right? And they don't even like try to explain other than the fact that he isn't adopted. So that's a reason why you can have a Cuban guy be a Mario brother. I like that. It's almost like Sonny Corleone and Tom Hagen, right? Bring him in from the street, and now he's at Corleone. But then all the supporting cast, Dennis Hopper, Samantha Mathis, of course, Fisher Stevens and Richard Edson as Iggy and Spike Koopa. Like, they are the dumb henchmen that become wicked smart later, and they're fantastic. You've got Mojo Nixon coming in for a minute before he comes the Goomba as Toad. Like, I feel like there's a lot of great stuff in this movie, and the fact that it is kind of scatterbrained really just kind of plays to what the whole idea was. Because remember, we're dealing with a Japanese concept that was kind of Americanized and bastardized when it was brought to America as a video game. So it only makes sense to kind of bastardize it even more so into a film and just do its own thing with it. That's why I get upset when people get so like lore centric and it's like breaking the legend and the lore and the story. Who cares? We got Mario Brothers, we got King Koopa, we got toadstools, we got fungus. Trust the fungus, man.
To me, this was perfectly cast. I mean, you can't get any better than Dennis Hopper as a villain. Even when he didn't buy into the villain, he is still at his best. He's still menacing. And you know what? Anything with Bob Hoskins in it is absolutely stunning. I mean, you can't pick a better Mario here. But
at the time, no.
At the time specifically. But here's where I think it does do right, is you do have a lot of these dark tones. You have the dystopian dimension of ugliness, but you have where I think the balance goes right is it uses a lot of its music. Composer Silvestri, I think his name is, that really does give a score to kind of lighten the tone a little bit. So when it comes to style, to editing, and the composition throughout the movie, it really does use its counterparts other than what the visuals that we see to really give that fun kind of feeling. So when we're in danger, we do have that whimsy that comes through that we would see through a Mario Brothers level. So it almost feels like we are playing these levels without going so full dedicated to making this a kids movie. This really did have a challenge. There is no right, even in the current Super Mario Brothers movie, there is no right way to do it. You're going to have people pissed off on how they handle the story, how they're going to attempt it. They made it a cartoon. Is it better than the 93? That is up for debate. Because there's going to be different interpretations of how we take these movies. Yes, there's a lot of technology on the side to make kind of the elements just work, but we're talking 1993 here.
Right. I mean, I might be speaking out of school because I'm not like a video game nerd, right? But it's different than comic book adaptations because with comic book adaptations, you have people who are heavily invested in the decades worth of world building and lore and character building. If you stray away from that too much, you lose some of that audience or you get the fanboy rage, and that happens regardless, right? But again, like video games, they didn't really have that yet. And they hadn't really built all the stories. Zelda probably had the deepest story of the well-known video games at that point, and they haven't even really tackled that yet cinematically. So I really think that it is a cool idea that the writers, and I think Ed Solomon of RoboCop fame has a lot to do with this, creating its own lore where now we have this idea that the comet that struck the Earth and killed the dinosaurs didn't really kill them. It split dimensions and knocked them into one where they became the predominant species and became like bipedal, almost humanoids, mostly humanoids, right? And then apes exist in the other one. And then the two dimensions merge. That's great world building. I am sorry. And the fact that we have like this kind of techno-fascist feudalist society where we do have a real dictator, King Koopa, and there's signs all over the place that say vote for Koopa, but no one votes for Koopa. He just is the dictator. He is the king. I think there's a lot of cool stuff in that kind of lore where we are taking propaganda and stuff that we recognize from all the world wars and other, like I said, techno-fascist societies, and we put it in this world where like lizards rule and mammals haven't evolved, and he's trying to merge the worlds together. Even if it wasn't a Mario Brothers movie, that's cool. I really think that's great world building. So bringing Mario Brothers into that, bringing Princess Daisy in a whole other form into that is just brilliant. And I don't think people were ready to have that kind of interpretation of such a family, kid-friendly intellectual property be that dark. This movie rocks the cyberpunk aesthetic, right? This is years after Blade Runner. This is like right around the same time as Demolition Man, but we've got all the cool punk stuff. We've got the almost like Cuba, though. It's techno cool, but it's decrepit. It's old. It's dying. It's falling apart. Aesthetically, that's great. They shot it in a big steel mill, like in Pennsylvania or something, right? And it feels it. It feels dirty. It feels like everyone probably got black lung from making this movie in this steel mill, but it really adds to the aesthetic. And these days, all that stuff would be done CG, and there's just something to really bring in and appreciate when you see how much time and effort was put into the aesthetic of this movie. Yet it was generally a kind of lower budget movie compared to others. Like, it really didn't have all the money to spend. So what it did with that money, I think, is just absolutely impressive.
Well, even when we take Koopa's castle, if you will, that looks cool. It looks sexy. It looks contemporary. We go through these settings that you go through the sleekness of the rich, if you will, of how you outland your castle, which could have been grungy. It could have gone medieval. It could have done everything that the video games interpret. But here we have two separate sets. We have the ugliness and then the dictator that takes care of whoever's in his castle and punishes those that don't abide by him in the castle, right? So I think this is where we really do have some cleverness to it. And again, I'm like you. I don't look at the lore of video games. I don't play video games that often, but this is one where it sets the tone of where this movie's going to go right from the first 5 minutes of the introduction of the dinosaurs. And somebody's probably going to be pissed off if I'm wrong, but I don't care. But I don't remember the lore of Mario Brothers having just dinosaurs. And that's where the game surrounds itself around. So, I mean, to me, this really says this is where we're going to take this story. We're going to focus around dinosaurs in two different dimensions. Like it or not, this is where we're going. So this really does set the expectation. And those that did follow the game are probably like, WTF, where is this movie going?
I think that it does a lot better job than Mortal Kombat did a couple years later. And I'm not going to just shit on the Mortal Kombat movie. It did what it needed to do at the time, but it also kind of like falls apart at the end. This one really doesn't. Like, this movie does have a really solid story, and it keeps its momentum all the way through the end. Even in some of the slower exposition scenes in the middle, it rewards you later for it, right? The fact that it brings Lance Henriksen in a cameo as, the Mushroom King, like, that's cool. I like that. It's almost a reward for trying to figure out what the hell is up with this fungus, right? There are a lot of holes in the story that you see them patchwork all the way through, but they do it with good intention, and it works out just fine. When you mention the club scene, let's talk about that, man. The music in this movie, it slaps. Not just the score. The score is great. Walk the Dinosaur, man. Everybody was singing Walk the Dinosaur when it came out, right? That is just a momentous scene. The Roxette song at the end, like, it really puts you in a place and time of like the early 90s. That just is a great, great soundtrack. Having Mojo Nixon in there for a minute, singing his anti-Koopa protest songs, that brings like the folk punk credibility to it. Like, there's a lot of pop culture in this movie. I love the fact that it is kind of like, let's say, a reverse Demolition Man, where there is all this pop culture, or Howard the Duck, so to speak, but in the dino world, right? Like, they've just got bad versions of everything that we have up here because it's a corrupt society. Again, that's great world building and great screenwriting. That's got to be Ed Solomon for sure, right? That's the stuff that he pulled from RoboCop, put right into the Super Mario Brothers movie. But that's where I think like this is kind of an underrated gem in so many ways, because the coolest stuff of this movie isn't necessarily the intellectual property. It's all of the viscera around it. It's the things that make it breathe. The set design, the art design, the costumes, the songs, and that political message. Like the devolution gun and the evolution part of it, where they can reverse it and make people smarter and evolve faster. Again, that's like a MacGuffin that really works for me. Like, the whole point is that Koopa wants to de-evolve the other dimension, the humans, and bring them down to monkeys. Also, at the same time, I feel like they don't spend too much time on that it bogs the movie down, because it's still a Mario Brothers movie. You gotta focus on the Mario Brothers, and they have to be heroes. This isn't a complaint at all, but this movie does have a lot of Big Trouble in Little China in it, right? Like, it kind of has the same beat for beat plot structure as Big Trouble in Little China. It has a lot of the same kind of villains. It has a lot of the same kind of aesthetics. You've got this motley crew of people going in and rescuing the damsels because they keep stealing the wrong ones. I'm not going to put the movie down for that. It is a common trope, but I think that a double feature of Mario Brothers and Big Trouble kind of works, because in a lot of ways they're kind of the same movie.
I love that you, first of all, brought up the soundtrack, because it's so underrated how the music is so brilliantly utilized here. Even from how they marketed it with the Pointer Sisters' Jump for My Love. So, but Roxette's Almost Real is a great song. This movie is full of smart insertions of music to really drive that fun factor. And as we go into it, you touched on it, is the de-evolution gun. This movie has an underlying message that's up front and center, but it doesn't want to make that the focal point. You have a dictator, and instead of using dialogue, a dictator doesn't want to just destroy his empire, if you will. He wants to make them dumber. He wants a blind follow. And the de-evolution gun is so brilliant as a prop to use to relay a message without trying to waste 5, 10, 15 minutes of dialogue to explain it. So I think there is a lot of symbolic things here that the movie does well, and still make it simplistic enough for kids to follow on the political aspects of it. So, it's one of those just simplistic movies that just screams across the board. It is a PG movie, but it does have underlying topics that adults are going to follow if you actually give it a chance and look at the things that it's showing you of the outcome, the political messaging, or the hero aspects of it. So it's just one of those movies that you really, if you gave it one shot, you have to revisit it because there are a lot. And I know this one is hard. It's a big debate if how good it is, if you will. But this is one, if you haven't seen it in years, see it again.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's hear what our critics had to say. Now, even before I start this, let's just put it out on the table that no critics liked this. Like, this was before it even hit the theater, like the pre-screening of it was just disastrous. I'd say Masters of the Universe back in like the late 80s had the same problem where critics saw it before it came out and it already had a bad rap before people even bought tickets. But let's just put that in the mindset as these guys tore it apart right away.
Our next movie is a film version of a popular video game. It's called Super Mario Brothers, and it doesn't work at all. This movie isn't either high or low tech enough. It's not as dazzling or as involving as the cutting-edge video games that would like to mirror, and it doesn't have the traditional movie elements like compelling characters or a fresh story. I also can't figure out exactly what age group this movie was made for. I guess I didn't like it. Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo play the Mario brothers, two Brooklyn plumbers who fall into an alternative universe where they try to rescue an abducted college student named Daisy, played by Samantha Mathis. And right there you see the problem. This movie can't decide whether it wants to be a flesh and blood film or a real video game. That kind of chase is boring compared with the urgency of a real video game where you're under constant pressure of time and your quarters running out. It takes a lot more imagination than what's been attempted with Super Mario Brothers to make a high-tech movie transfer.
Okay, I mean, so that's to be expected from Gene and any critic at that time, I'm sure. But one of the things that like I had to realize as critics saw this is that when you're the first video game movie, the first thing they're going to do is try and hold you up to the video game itself. Like you said at the beginning, if this wasn't a Mario Brothers movie and it was just like a straight kind of action sci-fi film, it follows all the tropes that most standard adventure sci-fi action movies did at the time. So it's not what he says where like it doesn't know what it's doing, it doesn't have proper sequences. It totally does, but they're too stuck on holding it to the video game itself. And I get it. Like it's hard for me to hold it against them because it is the first video game adaptation. People hated a lot of the comic book movies that came out in the 80s or the miniseries on TV in the 70s because they were played almost for cheap laughs. There was a campiness to it, and people were like, why are you doing this to my like well-regarded and trusted comic book lore? Why are you making it goofy? Why are you making it silly? You know, why is the Hulk fighting Bigfoot? Like that kind of stuff. But again, like that has to evolve over time as more adaptations come out. So this kind of just did have the inconvenience of being the sacrificial lamb of video game adaptation movies.
Well, I have to say this up front and center is I hate the way he says Mario. It drives me nuts and it
Mario.
Oh my God.
That's a very Midwestern way to say it though.
It's a tick with me. I hate it. But if we take away how many times he says Mario Brothers video games, this is like a one sentence review for Gene. Because again, this is one where I get it. It's going to be top of headlines. It's going to be the topic of conversation. So that's what you have to surround your review around to gain attention. I get it. Journalism, whatever. But at the same time, you have to separate it because it doesn't matter who the film is for. To me, it was pretty obvious. If we look at the video game adaptation, it has to appease adults. It has to appease kids. The music does it to kind of lighten the tone. The atmosphere is dark. So the balance to me is absolutely spot on to kind of give something for both. But we can't get past this is an 8-bit game. And the fact that Gene says the 8-bit games are more technology advanced than this movie, that's kind of
Cutting
bullshit.
edge, yeah.
Come on. This movie looks fantastic. And we go into the same kind of critique as we got from Ninja Turtles that Roger acknowledged is the atmosphere is what really drives this movie, which makes it unique. Take away the video game, take your journalist hat off and say, and look at it for what it is, imagination and creativity, because we see that from start to finish of the premise to the costumes, to the music, to the effects.
Well, I agree for 100%. Okay, so now Roger jumps in.
Yeah, this movie wasn't imagined
No.
correctly at the outset. They
Correct.
didn't start out with a vision of what it was going
Correct.
to be even before they did everything else.
Right.
And so you look at the movie and you see millions of dollars on the screen of special effects and all of those customized cars and that other world that they've created and everything else. And it doesn't add up to anything. It's just a lot of people running around, all talking at once in a plot that nobody cares anything about. And just every once in a while, a little moment that kind of sparkles. Dennis Hopper is kind of good in a couple of his speeches, but it's a complete waste of time and money.
Okay, so that being said, Dennis Hopper had not done Speed yet. That was still like a year or two away. And that's the movie that kind of really defined him as a villain in cinema. Now, he'd already been a villain in a few other things, right, that are actually really good. But this is the one that I think that like introduced him to a younger audience, right? And then a couple years later, those tweeners that were watching this movie were old enough to see him in Speed and be like, oh man, Dennis Hopper's scary. And then Waterworld right after, right? Like he did have this really great run of villainy for the kids that were too young to see him as Frank Booth in Blue Velvet, right? It's also very similar to Martin Sheen in the Spawn movie, right? There is something kind of cool about an actor that doesn't understand what they're doing and why they're in it, right? They have no idea what a Mario brother is. They have no idea what a Koopa is. So bringing themselves to a character that's almost like undetermined in their psyche makes it unique and cool, right? I think Jack Black brings his own kind of Bowser mentality to the character in these, most recent Mario Brothers movies, but that's someone who's probably been familiar with that character since he was a kid, right? You're allowed to grow with that character. So when we see or hear him as Bowser in these movies, it's almost like second nature because he knows what that character is. But there's something really cool about not knowing what this character is and putting your own spin on it, putting your own little flavor to it. And that's why I think that Koopa is one of like the underrated villains of the 90s. He's just so good in it. It's almost like he does make the movie. If it's just him, Hoskins, and Leguizamo and nothing else going on, I'd still watch it because all three of them are like just so fascinating because none of them have any idea what to do with these characters. And that's what makes it feel not so much like lip service to video game fans.
I'm going to say this in the nicest way I can is you compare your villains. I'm going to compare mine. His villain interpretation reminded me of Elmo in Grouchland because here's why is he knows the dialogue sucks. He knows his dialogue sucks. And we have moments where he's trying to work with it. And this is what a great actor he is anytime he knows a line sucks, he has to raise his arms. He has to have body language. He has to have a stare. That's what makes us believe this is a good villain. It is a good villain, but it's solely not for the dialogue. The dialogue is cheesy. It's cartoonish. And that's where I talk about, again, the balance. It takes a great actor to make this believable. And Dennis Hopper does nail it. He really does make us believe that this character, this villain, what he says is better than what it is. Because if we close our eyes, the dialogue is horrible. But Dennis Hopper...
How dare you?
Come on. One sentence lines. It's not a good villain script.
He's got one of the best lines of the 90s, and that's when he's in the mud pit and he says, you know what I love about mud? It's dirty and clean at the same time. That's a good line.
That goes into Roger's point. It does have moments. I'm not saying every line is bad, but it does have moments. But a majority of it is 1 to 2 sentences of just a stereotypical villain. He's a good villain, but I'm giving all the credit to Dennis Hopper here.
Okay. They finish it off here.
It is, and I think, the timing would have been right with this explosion in infotech or whatever you want to call it, that the computers and all that. Kids are very sophisticated now, and if you could mirror that in some way, you could be a big bonanza. This film doesn't even try.
What this movie shows is that it's a lot harder to make a high-tech movie like this than you would think. And when we see ones maybe that we still have problems with, like Batman Returns, it's so much better than this that you admire it more when you see something like this.
So he says something very interesting there. Like, they want to say that it should be a big extravaganza, special effects. This is one of the things that I've really had a hard time with video game adaptations is the live action ones. They're never as good, obviously, because you're having to base them in reality, the physics of reality for the most part. where the animated ones, like the Super Mario Brothers movie, they get away with a lot more because they're essentially a live action video game. Like they really are. Like it's the same technology these days of these computer animated movies that they would use to animate a video game with. So you get away with a lot more. You really have to rely on story and characterization at that point. Otherwise, I'm just gonna go play the video game, right? You got to put the jokes in there. You got to put the hip soundtrack in there to get people, really into it. The celebrity voices, of course. That's why I give way more credit to live action adaptations, even if they're not great, because you do have to create a whole world out of something that doesn't really exist. You have to break that uncanny valley that a lot of people are going to build based off of what they've played on these video games for years. Like, how are we going to represent the Mushroom Kingdom or the Koopa Underground, whatever it is, and get away with it? These guys decided we're not going to. We're just going to do our own thing and our own representation of like what a world under a dinosaur dictator looks like. I think that's where the movie wins. But again, it's too early for them to get it. They really want to see, you can tell from the review, they really want to see video game aesthetics just transposed into cinema. And we just weren't at that point yet. Creativity still ruled at this point. And I again, that's where it's hard to be a critic when you have new territory like this.
This movie was in a lose-lose situation because you can take all the stories of even original NES games that are more simplistic. Studios chose the most popular, of course, and the most difficult to translate on screen. So there was a courage to this, but I almost feel you should give a little bit of leeway. And I was listening to a review earlier with Gene. I think it was Another Stakeout, where he praised the aesthetics of Another Stakeout, where he enjoyed it of just looking at the scenery, the house, all that stuff. So here's another movie that you can appreciate the aesthetics, whether you like it, whether it's dark. Just because it's dark doesn't mean that it doesn't look cool. It doesn't look good. Does it affect you emotionally? That the setting should be treated just the same way as dialogue or a performance. Does looking at it affect you? And does it spark creativity? Here it does. And if he can critique the aesthetics of Another Stakeout, something so simplistic, how can you not see what's going on here? Just because it's dark doesn't make it ugly.
Okay, so I mean, obviously, neither of them like this movie. How are we supposed to grade them on that? Well, I think that Roger definitely works a little bit harder in his review than Gene does. Gene went exactly where I thought he would go. Just if he doesn't understand something, he just calls it like pointless and plotless and doesn't really put a lot of reasoning and exposition into his review. It's just kind of lazy. It's just Mario Brothers, right? What are we going to do with this concept? And it's loud and the kids, just it sounds like an old man screaming at clouds. So do I hate him for not liking the movie? No, I can't do that. But for just using the most generic language that he uses when he talks down on these, let's say, science fiction, fantasy movies or adaptation films or films that he just thinks, who's the audience for? It's just the same stuff he says over and over again. There's nothing new and there's nothing creative about it. So I'm going to give him a D.
I think that's fair. And usually I wouldn't say this, but I'm going to give Roger some leeway here. And critics should have a little bit of leeway. This is new territory. And again, like I said earlier, this is one that critics really had to capture that headline. They had to go to why people were seeing it because this was a Mario Brothers movie. This was an adaptation. They're going to spark a crowd to read what they thought. So I'm not going to fault them for that, but I am going to say with Roger, he is a little bit more detailed, but I am disappointed because we don't get into kind of what he's defended before, the aesthetics, the setting, the tone of it, things that should be appreciated, the costume design. I mean, again, this movie did get credit for a couple of awards for makeup and costume. That wasn't appreciated here. So there's more to a movie than just the source material. Find a win here. And Roger is usually the one to carry the torch to, even if he hates a movie, to say, I at least appreciated this. So I can't say it's a great review, but I understand it. And that's where I'm going to give a little bit of leeway, but not a positive review to Roger, but a bare miss at 2.5 stars.
Yeah, I mean, again, I just really can't be mad at them because I know that this is way above their heads, and that's okay. Again, like to be this kind of, whatever, silver generation people reviewing this movie about a new technology with a fan base they don't understand. We've seen them go through these arcs before. When slasher movies and horror movies became the niche in the early 80s, it took them a good 2 or 3 years to finally kind of warm up to the idea like, oh, people are actually they're making movies, right? They're not just making blood, gore, schlock fests. So you do have to be patient. Now, I'm sure we'll cover some stuff that was made like later on in the 90s as they kind of warm up to the idea of this. But again, like they had a hard time with a lot of the Star Wars and Ghostbusters ripoffs afterwards, and then kind of warmed up to them as people just did it better. This is just a great early example of them just, not knowing what a new genre essentially was going to be. And, like I said, this is a sacrificial lamb. Super Mario Brothers doesn't change the fact that I still think it's a great movie. Like, the fact that I've got it with Congo and Tank Girl up on my shelf, that means something. Movies that were like torn apart by critics that I actually have a very special place in my heart for.
It's a great movie, and I'll say it. It's a masterpiece. I didn't say it in the beginning, but I will say it now. People, it was just ahead of its time.
I mean, here's the thing too, is like, it's just interesting that we're watching this now because I had no idea, but all of a sudden randomly I'm getting all over my Facebook pages and Instagram, Roxette is out on tour again after like 40 years. New female singer because Marie Fredriksson died back in 2019, but it's just weird that we were watching this movie. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember the Roxette song after this and Pretty Woman came out, and now they're like on tour. The zeitgeist is weird, right? Roxette making a comeback, but whatever. All right, thank you for watching, listening. Please like, rate, review, subscribe on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Please leave us a review, and if there's any films you'd like us to cover, as long as they were covered by Roger and Gene on their show, and that we can find the audio and video on YouTube, we'll do it. We find ourselves getting caught all the time where it's like, I remember they reviewed this, but because it was a Disney film or something, it gets caught up and taken off the internet, and then we have to find some kind of loophole. So we will do an episode on that. The missing reviews because of Touchstone Pictures essentially is what it is. Movies that we're like, let's review those, and then we can't find any audio or video elements of them whatsoever. It drives me crazy, bro.
Pisses me off.
All right. Thank you for watching. You can find me over at thecultworthy.com. You can find my co-host Justin Henson over at
themoviewire.com.
I'll see you next week.
See you next week.